This is your Daily 5 for Monday, September 29th, 2025. For one of our communal movie commentary, whatever's we're calling them now, we watched a movie that's been on my list for a little while, a 1987 folk horror film titled, well, either Eyes of Fire or Crying Blue Sky, which apparently Crying Blue Sky is the director's cut title, which is what we watched, because even though I thought it was titled Eyes of Fire, well, actually it was titled Eyes of Fire, when we actually started watching it, we had an alternate title, which is not very uncommon for what I thought was a foreign film, and I've now since found out that no, in fact, this was an American film, which I'm pretty shocked by, because it certainly doesn't feel like it, but I would say that that's probably a credit to the movie. And the film is centered around, well, Lando placed it at the 1700s sometime, where a small group of people are driven out of the village that they're living in because a number of, well, one of them is suspected of being a witch, and the other is a polygamous preacher, which at that time was basically cause for death. And so they are exiled and they go off into the woods to try to make their own little community, and bad things suddenly follow them. And the movie itself it's a slow burn. I think at first I was actually it's about an hour and 50 minutes long. And the first 20 minutes, I thought maybe I'd made a mistake, that this was too slow a film for the two of us to watch. And if you watch the commentary, there's a period of time where we're not saying much. I think because both of us were trying to get our heads around what this movie was doing. But then there was a certain point where things started to make sense. We started to have an idea. And Lando, frankly, looked up a synopsis. And once we understood that the movie was not going to follow the path we thought maybe it was going to, we understood that this was probably going to be a movie that we enjoyed. And I think we both did. It's something very different than what we've typically watched before. It's not all that unusual to me as a folk horror film. It does have that feeling. I really was convinced that it was not an American film, because it was taking its time, because there was one giveaway, which I will not talk about now, but there was one element of it that I think really, the more I watched it, I started to go, yeah, this is something that once I found out it was an American-made film, made more sense. I won't specify what it is. I will keep this relatively spoiler-free, but we'll talk about it on Friday. But it should have been a clue to me. But there were points where the movie did some fake-outs that I was like, but no, never happened. Now, none of that is detrimental to the film. I think it was wonderfully done. It definitely has, at one point when certain characters appeared, Lando said something like, oh, is this turning into Legend, the Ridley Scott film? And there is definitely that fantasy and kind of surreal, dreamlike feeling to everything. This kind of, even though there's not technically soft focus all over the place, there is almost this soft focus feel. I think on the commentary I said, well, if we start seeing glitter in the air, then we have entered into Legend. It does feel that way, where there's characters that you're not really sure if they're real or not. There are things that happen that for a long time you're not really sure whether it's actually happening or whether these people are under stress and they're imagining things. And then there is a certain point where the movie makes a decision. It definitely goes in a specific direction where it is no longer a question as to whether what you're seeing is real or not. And I think once it does that, then the movie really ramps up. But I think it takes a smart tone in the beginning where it's trying to put you a little bit off balance. Not in a massive way. I don't think it is, a David Lynch type of escapade where you really don't know where you are sometimes. But it is playing with this idea that, at this time where people were far more superstitious, are they just imagining things? Are they just seeing things? Or are these things actually happening? And I think that works in its favor, especially once it does make a decision, because then some of the things that happen afterwards make sense with that uncertainty early on. Overall, I would absolutely recommend it. I think Lando will agree when we talk about it on Friday, but I would recommend it for people who are into kind of slower horror films. It's not that nothing happens. This is not a Solaris or Stalker type of film. It's not that slow, but it definitely takes its time before it really starts having people break down and having everything fall apart and having the crises start to mount up. So again, Eyes of Fire or Crying Blue Sky, whatever title, actually see the director's cut, see Crying Blue Sky. If you're into this type of movie, I think you'll have a really good time with it. Later.